sometimes the powers that be offer a take that is very revealing. What I'm referring to is related to a story that I've alluded to before but haven't really reported on yet that comes from this past December. As it turns out, the powers that be in the Vatican have been caused a great deal of stress and anxiety by elements of the Catholic media, including the Catholic alternative media. They've been experiencing anxiety because there are now media outfits, both large and very small, that refuse to ignore the fire in Christ's church. This is made all the more infuriating for them because, like their secular progressive counterparts, there is no putting the alternative media genie back in the bottle. The internet cannot be contained, at least not yet. In a way, that same internet has enabled the establishment of countless media outlets to emerge without the need of patronage of the elites, be they secular or ecclesial. The alternative media, be they established outfits like The Remnant, Church Militant, The Wanderer, or Catholic Family News, rely solely on their subscribers and advertisers. The same is true for more recent startups like 1 Peter 5 and a certain YouTube channel that you're watching now. These outlets cannot be controlled as they answer to their audiences and not to some faceless corporate sponsors, or in the case of Catholic media, not to an ecclesial structure that is preaching more and more a secular gospel that looks less and less like historic Catholicism with every passing week. This naturally terrifies the elites. At the most recent synod, whose topic was the promotion of morally corrupting the youth of the church, ecclesial leaders promulgated a list of approved Catholic media outlets. This was the first salvo in the fight against dissident voices. I say dissident when perhaps I should say voices of resistance or restoration, because the list of groups I named, and many others, all want more or less the same thing: a return to Catholic tradition, so to speak. The powers that be in the hierarchy admit themselves that what they had was a revolution in the church. Then Cardinal Ratzinger even described the council as the French Revolution in the church, and I'm not exactly certain if he meant that as a positive or negative thing. Either way, the promulgation of a list of approved Catholic media outlets is the closest the church has had to an index of forbidden books since the 1960s, except this is of course in reverse. The list is definitely English language focused, as the establishment has yet to realize that the current phase of the more than century-long crisis in the church isn't only an American issue. There have been resignations of priests and bishops for preying on minors and seminarians, as well as their arrests, all over the world, yet the epicenter is the United States. Let's have a look at the list of approved Catholic media outlets. I guarantee you that you won't be that surprised by who's on that list. At the 2018 Synod, Father Thomas Rosica distributed approved news sources to the faithful and to the participants. This was, of course, an attempt to stem the flow of information and to prevent Synod participants from accidentally having to answer tough questions from real journalists instead of to controlled media outlets. These groups received the seal of approval from the Vatican, a sort of neo-imprimatur. If you're not familiar with Father Thomas Rosica, he's a modernist of a similar cut to Pastor Jimmy Martin of the Jesuit Church. Both are Jesuits, and both operate large media establishments in North America with a shocking level of access to the bishops. Rosica operates Salt and Light Media out of Canada, which offers typical feel-good Church of Nice modernist media content that is widely used in the church for reformation and among the laity who don't know that they're being propagandized. The list that was distributed by Rosica on behalf of the modernist establishment has the usual Catholic outlets on it. We see here under the heading of Trusted Sources for Catholic News, the Catholic News Service, which is operated by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. You can think of them as the NPR of the American Catholic establishment. We have here Salt and Light Catholic Media Foundation and Television Network. The list was provided by Father Thomas Rosica, who runs Salt and Light Catholic Media Foundation and Television Network. Convenient. We have America Media from our good friend Pastor Jimmy Martin of the Jesuit Church. The Tablet out of London. We have Crux, who profess to be taking the Catholic Pulse. The National Catholic Reporter. Okay, I'll get to that in a second. Catholic TV out of Boston. La Stampa, which is Vatican Insider from Italy, the Vatican's official news agency. You would expect to see them on a list like this. Also, you have Vatican.va. And, of course, the Christian Media Center Holy Land, which is one I had not heard of previously. The very idea of the National Catholic Reporter being considered trustworthy should be startling to anyone who's been paying attention for any length of time. Before the arrival of the current pontificate, the Vatican and the U.S. bishops had actually notified the National Catholic Distorter that they need to remove the word Catholic from their name and branding, as they promoted open heresy and heterodoxy to such an extent that even the modernist establishment couldn't ignore it anymore. The National Catholic Reporter is one of the mainstays for liberalizing the church further, for promoting greater modernism, including the ordination of women and that kind of thing. Think about the implications of that, and then consider that now the Distorter is considered a trustworthy media outlet. I've said it before, but I'll say it again here. These are the equivalent of Catholic Pravda. If you're not familiar with Pravda, it was the official media arm of the Soviet Union, and promoted the official line of the state for political and social news. Dissent was, as you can imagine, not tolerated. And we seem to be moving in that direction with the alternative media in the church today, and actually in the broader secular culture as well. This all became relevant because a few days ago, Pope Francis made remarks in an airline press conference, like he frequently does, much to the consternation of those of us who hate those press conferences. In that conference, he was asked about why people leave the church. In a way that is almost too close to being accurate, he said it was because of hypocrites in the church. If he understood how that sounds, well, he keeps known members of the Rainbow Coalition, shall we say, in his inner circle, while also simultaneously saying he worries about those kinds of men in the priesthood, he might have chosen his words more carefully. Thankfully for him, that's why he employs an official propaganda minister, press officer. And that press officer is a man named Andrea Tornielli, who was a journalist in Italy, and has since built off what he said there in the following article.
Real Catholic media don't look for heretics everywhere, official says. By Cindy Wooden of Catholic News Service. Vatican City. The rise of media that call themselves Catholic but seem to exist only to judge others is less about criticizing Pope Francis and more about the misguided notion that to affirm one's own orthodoxy, one must find someone to label a heretic, said a Vatican communications official. Andrea Tornielli, the new editor-director of the Dicastery for Communication, was commenting on Pope Francis's remarks January 24th to the bishops of Central America about Catholics losing compassion. The Pope's meeting in Panama took place on the feast of St. Francis de Sales, patron saint of journalists, Tornielli noted. Successful evangelization, the Pope told the bishops, does not need vast financial resources or dozens of events, but it does require the centrality of compassion. However, Pope Francis added, I worry that compassion is losing its centrality in the Church. Even Catholic groups have lost it, or, to be less pessimistic, are losing it. In some Catholic communications media, there is no compassion, the Pope said. Instead, one finds schism, condemnation, malice, fury, self-aggrandizement, and the denunciation of heresy. Tornielli, writing for Vatican News, said the picture painted by the Pope unfortunately is a reality in front of everyone's eyes. Even among media that proclaim themselves Catholic, there is the spreading habit of wanting to judge everything and everyone, putting ourselves on a pedestal and getting worked up especially over brothers and sisters in the faith who have different opinions. One must not think this profoundly anti-Christian attitude, even if carried by Catholic media, is a transitory phenomenon tied only to the daily criticism of the current pontiff, Tornielli wrote. The posture of such Catholics, he says, has less to do with the way Pope Francis challenges their assumptions and their faith, and more to do with him thinking, each day my identity requires me to pick an enemy I can pounce on, someone to attack, someone to condemn, someone to judge as a heretic.
The accusation of schism is definitely interesting. What does he mean by that precisely? Are we schismatics for holding fast to the traditional Catholic faith that has been taught since the earliest days of the Church? Are we schismatics for refusing to go along with novelty and the promotion of frankly secular politics wrapped up in the trappings of the faith. Are we schismatics for disagreeing with the modernist agenda? The call to tolerate different opinions rings pretty hollow in the aftermath of the hammer being dropped on the slaves of the Immaculate Heart, or the destruction of the Franciscan friars, or any other traditional religious community that has run afoul of the modernists for having supposed Lefebvrist tendencies. And that's the rub. What they're saying here is rather simple. Fall in line. Stop calling out obvious errors and submit to novelty. Soon enough, you'll see more action against dissident or restorationist Catholic media as the current phase of the crisis in the church really and truly ramps up in 2019 and beyond. There is a real need for more independent Catholic voices, not fewer. At present, there are a few media outfits that I really trust, aside from the ones I named above. And in the digital realm, on platforms like YouTube and others, there are a precious few. This is why I will promote new voices who emerge in this fight to restore order and the traditional faith to the church. The time is ripe for new voices to take up the mantle of fighting for Christ's church in the public realm. If you're interested in joining that fight, the time has never been better. I strongly encourage you all who are interested to join this growing movement that has the establishment modernists so anxious. There is plenty of room, even with those bigger alternative outfits that I've named. To that end, I am making an offer to you, the listener. I am opening up my blog, returntotradition.org, for submissions from the audience. Any accepted submission will be unpaid, unfortunately, as I don't make a living off of this, at least not yet. If you want to submit an article, my email address is in the description of this video. I won't accept every submission, and I reserve the right to ask for edits. This, by the way, includes asking you to use coded language in order to protect myself against the draconian and unconstitutional speech regulations on these platforms. And this call is open to people who have been asking me to cover certain controversies in the church that I haven't touched. So if you're interested, get those in. Until further notice, the call for submissions is an open call. If you like videos like this, like and share this video and subscribe, and click the notification bell below. If you're interested in supporting my work, there are various options in the description below, along with links to my social media, the Sources blog, and the Return to Tradition Facebook page. Thank you for listening. I'm Anthony Stein. Ave Maria.